Well, this one is for the drivers. We're heading to a place that's held in such high regard by motorcyclists and sports car drivers that it could be considered one of the best driving roads in Victoria, if not Australia. For its roughly 60-kilometre run, there are over 400 corners. And given that we're about 2 hours out of Melbourne, we're unlikely to see any other vehicles. Now I hear what you're saying. James, I don't have a sports car and I don't have, or if you're like me, I'm not allowed, a motorcycle. Long story. And if you found yourself on such an amazing stretch of road, you'd probably be in a sensible 5-door family SUV. Well, I'll tell you what, we've compromised today because we are in that sensible family 5-door SUV. It's just that this one has, well, a lot of power. It's faster around the Nürburgring than the 1,000 horsepower Bugatti Veyron hypercar, and it has more power than 3 Yamaha R1 superbikes strapped together. The car is the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT, and the drive is the Eildon-Jamieson Road. Sport mode on, let's go. Located about 2 hours northeast of Melbourne, the holiday town of Eildon is nestled along the shores of the lake with which it shares its name. The town was established during the construction of the first Sugarloaf Reservoir Dam in 1929, but it grew during the 1950s when the water storage was expanded to the current footprint of Lake Eildon we know today. The lake, which is Victoria's most popular inland boating location, is big. It stores some 3.4 million megalitres of water, or about 6 times the capacity of Sydney Harbour. The shoreline extends for more than 515 kilometres, and importantly for visitors, you won't find any sharks, crocodiles or sea monsters lurking under the surface. Now before we hit the road, let's take a closer look at our gallant steed here, because 2022 marks an important anniversary for the Porsche Cayenne. It celebrates 20 years in market. The original Cayenne entered production back in 2002. Now a lot of things have changed since then, but one thing remains the same. Under that bonnet is a V8 petrol engine, although a pretty powerful one. We've got a twin-turbo 4-litre unit with 471 kilowatts, or around 630 horsepower, and a massive 850 newton metres of torque. Now what that means? It's really fast. It sits 17 millimetres lower than a regular Cayenne Turbo Coupe, and along with the uprated engine has a revised driveline that still uses multi-chamber air suspension to improve road holding and handling. Now that's on top of the active roll stabilisation and 4-wheel steering systems that do their best to make the big SUV feel much more nimble on tight runs. Aerodynamics have been tweaked. There's Alcantara everywhere. You've got no shortage of tech, and it all equates to the Cayenne Turbo GT completing a 7-minute, 38.9 second lap around the Nürburgring, a record for an SUV. Oh, and it costs about $336,000 before options and on-road costs. So yes, there is a price for practical Porsche perfection. Now you can get all the details, including a full review of the 2022 Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT at drive.com.au. Now worth noting, the Turbo GT is available exclusively in the Cayenne Coupe body style. And what is interesting about this is that although BMW started this squashed SUV trend with the X6 and then followed with an X4, and then Mercedes-Benz followed and nearly every Audi followed, those cars account for around 15 to 20% of sales here in Australia compared to the wagon, whereas the Cayenne is around 50-50 split between coupe and wagon body styles. It's still practical, there's still a lot of room, all our camera gear's in there. It basically means that people who are buying a $400,000 racing off-road 911 are kind of going, I don't really care if the kids don't have as much legroom. This is kind of cooler. Anyway, enough about the car. The skies are clear, the birds are singing. Let's hit the road.
After the break, James unwinds the Turbo GT and starts counting corners on the Eildon-Jamieson Road.
Now, if you are thinking of bringing your kids on this run, especially after lunch, as we go right and then left, better bring the sicky bags.
Welcome back. James is about 2 hours from Melbourne, heading to an infamous driver's road in a very potent Porsche.
Now, you know you're in for a fun drive when you see a bunch of signs warning motorcyclists that this is a potentially risky road. So it means, well, we do need to take a lot of care, but it also means it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, while this road may be amazing in a smaller Porsche like a Boxster or even a 911, the big Cayenne is just eating it up. The V8 up front is a tremendously flexible engine. Now, we are in the most comfortable sedate mode that this car offers. It's basically always in sport mode, but this has got the softest tune, the most relaxed gear changes, and even then, it's pretty eager to go. But what I'm finding, between you and me, is the response isn't quite where I want it, but that's okay because I can dial it into either Sport or Sport Plus mode. Now, you could have probably heard the pitch change there on the engine. It starts to hold gears for a bit longer. We're coming through a couple of S's here and it hasn't shifted down from third or hasn't shifted up to fourth or fifth as we were before. And what it means is our response is a little bit more urgent as we begin to wind things on. Now listen to that. What it means here is that we can really sort of start to understand what this car can do on a road like this while still playing within the speed limit, which I tell you what is a really, really fun thing to be able to do. It comes back to the old adage of it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than to drive a fast car slow. And I'll tell you what, it's also quite a lot of fun to drive a fast car fast, but we'll save that for the track. Now, it is worth noting that the road here is 100 km/h posted, but we haven't even got to 100 km/h, and in this car we can get there pretty jolly quickly. We're sort of hovering between 60 and 90 as we weave in and out of these corners. On the brakes, tip it in, you can feel the car wiggle around, but we are in its most docile setting. There are another couple of things here, including a juicy red button that I'll explain in a moment because it should make things even more entertaining.
Up next, James pushes the little red button. James has taken the fastest SUV that Porsche offer and threaded it along the infamous Eildon-Jamieson Road.
Now here we are, we're quite a few kilometres into our run along this road and it has tightened quite considerably. It's left, right. The lanes feel barely wider than the car. And what I'm seeing is the cover of trees has really closed under. Now, one of the things that you find out about this run along the Eildon-Jamieson Road is if the weather is a bit colder or if it's wet, that coverage of trees can stop the sun from coming through and warming up the road. So you do need to be careful, even on a nice day, if it's been wet overnight or it's been cold overnight, that there still may be wet and perhaps slippery patches on the road. But it's part of what makes this run so much more entertaining and challenging as a driver. Now, you might be able to tell that the road has gotten somewhat windier than when we first started out of Eildon. These twists and turns are coming thick and fast, and we're finding that the car is barely getting out of second gear, which makes it quite a lot of fun. And we are still not even, I guess, scratching the surface of what this thing can do. It's a lot of fun, but it's not really able to stretch its legs. Now you've got a rotary dial that can change between the standard drive mode to Sport, Sport Plus, and even an individual setting. There is a very juicy red button sitting in the middle of all of this, which is, well, Porsche call it Sport Response, and it's basically an overboost button, a push to pass like you see in Formula One or in computer games, that basically gives you a countdown. And I've just pressed it, there's a countdown working its way, 10, 9, 8, for the car's full performance to be available to you when you need to say, oh, I don't know, overtake a large jet on takeoff or pass a city really quickly. Not so much use out here, but I imagine in Europe or the Middle East, this thing would be one awesome car. Now, something else you need to know about the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. It was, for a time, the fastest SUV in the world, 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. But it's a title that has now been taken by the Aston Martin DBX 707. And I gotta say, when you're fighting for whose very expensive and very powerful SUV is fastest, you know you're sort of operating in good company. But might not be the world's fastest, but it is Porsche's fastest. However, it is not the most powerful. That accolade goes to the Cayenne Turbo S E-Hybrid. That's right, the petrol V8 is not enough to give you the edge in the full power stakes. You need the battery power and added boost of a hybridization system, which I guess is a good thing when we look towards the future. With 60 kilometres and over 400 corners under our wheels, we arrived at the pretty little town of Jamieson on the southern edge of the lake. Like many towns in the area, Jamieson owes much of its history to the gold mining boom of the mid-1800s. But now it's a quiet but picturesque stopping point on the way to more adventures or perhaps a tasty treat from the local general store. We stopped here for lunch, but then headed back up the hill to work out our next plan of action. Oh, now would you look at that? Now, one of the things you don't really notice when driving along this road is just how high up we've come. And I guess looking down here at the bottom part of the lake, you can see nestled among the valley and the mountains behind it, just shows you what a spectacular area this is. But you know what? There's an even better lookout point back in Eildon. And I've heard that the run along the Eildon-Jamieson Road is even better from Jamieson to Eildon. So let's find out.
Up next, James and his spicy Cayenne find a great vantage point to take in a high country sunset. James has taken the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT from Eildon to Jamieson, and now it's time to head back. 400 corners down, 400 to go.
Now, I tell you what, there is something about hugging the side of the cliff on this side rather than the tight Armco and drop off on the other that does make this direction a little bit more, I guess, safe feeling, and perhaps maybe a cheeky bit faster that you find. Maybe it is just because we're used to the road or even used to the car by now. But I will say that as amazing as this road has been, I reckon it's too much for our Cayenne. I think we've barely been able to scratch the surface of what this car can do because it's so constrained on this tight and winding road. Now, the other thing that we have noticed today is just how brake heavy it is through here. The Turbo GT has carbon ceramic brakes, so they've got tremendous and repeatable stopping power, which we have needed because despite all of the carbon fibre and all of the alloys and all of the plastics and aluminium that this car uses to save weight, it is still a 2.2 tonne vehicle, which means, for context, it's like driving a very fast rhinoceros. It's even the same colour.
It's there.
Now, in our day of running to both Jamieson and then back again to Eildon along this road, we've come across 3 other vehicles. It is like our own private windy mountain road out here. It is an amazing place to come, especially midweek. And I can see why it is so popular with motorcyclists and lighter sports car owners. It's such a fun and rewarding trip to make. That is really pretty out there. So we're winding our way along the top of a ridge where off to our right is Lake Eildon, and you can see through these gaps in the trees just bits of water, and the sun hits it, it sort of shines and reflects in your eyes. There's rosellas in the trees. It really is an amazing part of Victoria. It's such a pretty part of the world. And we're out here all by ourselves. Albeit shattering the silence with a very loud twin turbocharged V8. Well, I tell you what an amazing day we have had with the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. 400 corners that way, 400 corners back again. That's 800 corners total for those of you keeping count at home on the Eildon-Jamieson Road. It has been a ripper run. There was wildlife. I even saw a deer. Amazing places to see, a really nice place to eat. And now we're back here in Eildon just in time for a spectacular sunset. Tell you what, I'm going to sit back and enjoy that, and I'll see you next time for a drive. Our drive today took us to Eildon, which is about 150 kilometres or 2 hours drive from Melbourne. The Eildon-Jamieson Road starts on the southern end of the town, near the golf club, and winds its way along the bottom of the lake's catchment reserve, through the forest for a bit over 60 kilometres and 400 corners to Jamieson. From here you can head north to Mansfield, which is about 30 minutes away, or like us, head back to Eildon and take in the view from Fogg's Lookout near the Jerusalem Creek Marina, which is just 10 minutes out of town. Now, when talking tyres, we all know about the width and the rim size, but 2 of the most important digits on your rubber are the speed rating and the load rating. The load rating, or load index, is a number that lets you know what the heaviest weight your tyres can support while they are operating at speed. Our Cayenne has a load index of 106 up front and 107 at the rear, which means each tyre can support up to 950 or 975 kilograms at any one time. It's important to never use tyres rated under your car's recommended amount, particularly in a performance or heavily laden situation. To ensure you've got the correct tyres for your car, for whatever speed and more importantly load that you're carrying, speak to the team at Bob Jane T-Marts.
For more information on pricing and specifications, head to drive.com.au. Plus, get all the details for this drive by scanning the QR code on your screen or visiting us online. Next week on the show, you've all heard of the Great Ocean Road. Well, I'll take you there, eventually. But first, there's a must-see route to tackle. That's next week on Drive.